Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alondra Cano, and I will be chairing the committee today. And today's date, let's see, this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee on Thursday, April 21st, 2016. I am joined by council members Barbara Johnson, Jacob Fry, and Abdiwar Sameh. So today's agenda is pretty straightforward. We have one item on consent, which is the Department of Intergovernmental Relations United Black Legislative Agenda. And that is a passage of the resolution supported the United Black Legislative Agenda, which relates to policy proposals of individuals and communities of African descent in the state of Minnesota. And we have two items under discussion, and that's under the City Coordinator's Office. The item number one is our global partnerships and a Minneapolis Sister Cities update. And then we have a federal, state, and local legislative update. So we will go ahead and approve the consent items. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 And we will begin with our discussion items. So global partnerships and Minneapolis Sister Cities Committee. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Cano and committee members. My name is Jenny Chayabut. I'm with the City Coordinator's Office, and I'm here today to talk with you about Sister Cities. Unfortunately, Bill D. from Meet Minneapolis is not available to join us today, but I would like to note his involvement in managing the Sister Cities program and contributing to today's report. For your consideration today is a recommendation to limit the number of Minneapolis Sister Cities to 12. So we can focus on continuing and reactivating the connections that we currently have. I have just a few brief slides to show you. Minneapolis currently has sister cities in the following countries. I will list these quickly by date of City Council resolution. The countries represented are Chile, Canada, Finland, Japan, Russia, France, China, Sweden, Kenya, Mexico, Iraq, and Somalia. Compared to most other U.S. cities, Minneapolis has an average number of sister cities. There are some cities such as Seattle, Chicago that have significantly more, but we're in an approximate range. Most of our sister cities have some level of activity and an active sister city committee. There are two, Winnipeg, Canada, and Novosibirsk, Russia, that do not currently have sister city committees. Meet Minneapolis is currently in conversations with the American-Russian Chamber of Commerce of Minnesota about reactivating Novosibirsk. And we do have the Consulate General of Canada here in Minneapolis. So that's an opportunity to talk about reactivating that relationship. Thank you. That does conclude my presentation, and I am happy to stand for any questions.
Councilmember Barbara Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do think it makes some sense for us to draw a line, but I'm just wondering if then we will look back at our existing sister cities and see what it takes to get them to become more active or encourage more activity, and then do a reassessment. And I don't know if anybody's ever dropped out of a sister city relationship, but I do know, there are some that are more active than others, and it kind of waxes and wanes with obviously the volunteer effort that's supports it at the local level. So thoughtfully, I think we shouldn't just say no more and not look at what we have to say. Does this still make sense too?
Any thoughts on that? No.
Councilmember or Chair Cano and Council President Johnson, I'm happy to reflect on it also, or come back at a later date with some further reflection.
Councilmember Jacob Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Council President. I think that makes a whole lot of sense if we're going to put a limitation, to also examine the sister cities that we presently have, and whom do we have an actual real relationship with that ultimately bears fruit. If you look at Ibaraki, it's my understanding that they're fairly stringent with the sister cities that they do and don't have, and if the relationship is not forthcoming, then they ultimately drop it. I think that makes sense.
I have a question. So I'm aware that we have, these sister city relationships, and I'm aware that there's people that come visit us, and we're able to go visit them. How much of our city's budget is spent on supporting activities for these sister cities committees? Because it's unclear to me who's really supposed to provide the resources to host these groups of folks when they come here. There's oftentimes meetings that happen, and sometimes there's, exchange of, information and ideas and strategies, and, that requires some level of resources to kind of put together. So I'm just curious about if you know how much of our city's budget is spent on supporting sister city activities, and does that primarily happen through Meet Minneapolis or other mechanisms?
Chair Cano, I believe historically it was up to $50,000 of the contract with Meet Minneapolis for Meet Minneapolis to manage the Sister Cities program. I will need to double check this, but I believe that was also recently increased. It could be to 75, but I'd like to verify that I'm being accurate with that information. And that goes directly that's part of the Meet Minneapolis contract set aside for sister cities.
So it's strictly Meet Minneapolis that manages that those relationships and helps when people come visit us. It's not the city coordinator's office per se.
Chair Cano, that is correct in the dollar figures, although city staff time, which is not budgeted separately but included in ongoing duties, is included. So it could include my time, it could include the visit to a department to give a presentation if it's a professional exchange. So there are non-specific budget dollar connections, but definitely staff time is also a contribution.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, sounds great. So that is, the motion here is to approve limiting the total number of Minneapolis sister cities to 12 to focus our current resources on continuing or reactivating the 12 sister city connections currently attached to the city. So I will move that forward. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And that moves ahead. Our last item here is a federal, state, and local legislative update from our Department of Intergovernmental Relations.
Madam Chair, thank you. My name is Gene Ranieri. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the city. Today, is the third deadline for the legislature, which means all finance bills need to be passed out of the Finance and Ways and Means Committee today. And then starting next week, there will be more action on the floor, and those bills will probably be debated and go into conference committee within the next 2 weeks. The bills, the Senate, I think, is almost complete all their work. The House has one finance bill left, and will be finishing that up today. One of the bills, now as you're aware, and I think we talked about this last time, the House has a spending target for all of their committees that sums up to zero. So in other words, they don't want to spend any extra money. Now, within some of those budgets, there's some increases, but it's offset by decreases. In the Senate, they decided to spend $489 million in supplemental budget funding. Of that, around $91 million is going to be in the equity article of the supplemental budget bill. That article was approved last night, and I can quickly, if you wish, go through some of the things that are in that bill. So some of the issues in the bill, where many folks were concerned that maybe it was too metro-centric, there was too much money going to the metropolitan area. In looking at the bill, and the committee's staff will be doing this, well, I think we're going to discover that many of the programs are statewide or a 50-50 match, and there are some that are specific to certain areas of the state, certain ethnic groups of the state. So it looks like it'll be a pretty balanced bill. I have the spreadsheet for the committee to distribute, and it's not the typical traditional spreadsheet. It's just for 1 year, and it has how they decide to go through the funds. If I can, we can. To get to this point, the subcommittee met 3 times last week and reviewed roughly 60 different pieces of legislation and spent the last 3 or 4 days trying to put together a budget that would pass their subcommittee and also the finance committee and go to the floor. As you can see, there are about 5 or 6 state departments that are going to be administering the funds. The largest appropriation is to the Department of Employment and Economic Development. In that, you see there are about 16 different programs. Many of those programs will affect the city of Minneapolis, or people in our city. Among them are the YWCA, Emerge, which is number 5 on the list. Number 6, the initiative program would be extended to be statewide and serve all communities. Another issue is the number 15, grant to address Somali youth and community resiliency. That was Senator Deesick's bill. That's a $2 million appropriation, and 50% of that is supposed to be expended in greater Minnesota. Now, there's no companion bill in the House, so we'll have to see how this works out. But there is a lot of funding going for job training, for youth investment, youth development. And if we look at number of youth at work, that is the summer youth program. There's $8 million in that program. And that could be, again, distributed statewide. Minneapolis, our Step Up program will receive some of those dollars. What's key to remember, too, is all of these programs will have to go through a reporting system, and the state will be the fiscal agent. And these funds are available until 2019, which raises a very interesting issue about what happens in the next biennium in terms of appropriations. There's some Department of Corrections has a small appropriations to help folks transition from their care into the community. There's money to administer the program, the Minnesota Management and Budget. Admin has some money for software. Education, the programs in the education department are mostly to train teachers to work in inner city or in communities where there's low income and communities of color throughout the state. There's also some funding and some specificity to providers for the adult basic education program, trying to lift people to get at least a GED and be able to train for jobs, and that's going to be statewide. There's also some funds for human services. It's the SNAP program, and I don't know all the details, but it's to help with food stamps. And then the Department of Agriculture has it's $5 million, and that's for the food access program. This is from the Heart Association. The Heart Association is suggesting legislation that would set up in the Department of Agriculture a grant program to help with things like food farmers markets, help with rehabilitation and redevelopment of grocery stores, help with putting stores in food deserts, which we have here in our city. It's a rather ambitious program. They have a 23-member advisory committee, and it has been heard in the House, but it wasn't funded. But this program is in this equity position. And then there's money for the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. Many of those programs are existing, and this will be money on top of that. Again, the caution, the House has a different type of approach, so we'll go to conference and see what happens. But there's a lot of support for this in the Senate, and there was bipartisan votes both in the subcommittee and the full committee last night. Lots of questions, though, about making sure that funds got out to greater Minnesota. And I'll stop and try and answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Sure. Thank you. That was a very informative update, and I'm looking around to see if we have some questions. Councilmember Warsame.
Thank you, Chair Cano. Mr. Ranieri, item number 19, the Youth at Work grant program.
Yes.
The $8 million. Is there is there a similar bill or a support bill at the House for that?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Warsame, there is, and actually there's money, but it's only $400,000.
Oh, for that.
So there's a big gap.
All right. What about the Emerge one, number 5?
Number 5, I don't think there is funding in the House. but we still have a process to go through yet, conference committees, et cetera.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can, oh, sorry.
Nope, I was just going to say, I'm just looking around to see if there's more questions, but go ahead.
If I can switch to another topic, is the bonding bill. I had mentioned that the finance bills are done and the policy bills are now all on the floor. What's left is bonding, taxes, and transportation, 3 major bills. The bonding bill, we expect maybe in the next 2 weeks. As you're aware, the House is suggesting a $600 million issuance of bonds and maybe some cash. They're talking about possibly taking some of the surplus and using it for roads and bridges. And a $600 million bonding bill would be very difficult to pass, I think, because there wouldn't be a lot of projects in there. The Senate will be coming out with their bill later, and it'll probably be closer to the governor. And theirs will probably be over $1 billion. We have our 10th Avenue Bridge, the emergencies, improvements to the Emergency Operations Center, Fire Training Center, also the cemetery and the 35W Lake Street. Those 4 projects are active with us. We know good indications. We've talked to folks about the projects, but there's no final decision yet. The other bill, taxes, both bills, the Senate has about $300 million in their tax budget. The House has half of the $900 million, is on $450. The Senate is looking at property tax and middle income tax relief. The House is also looking at those, as well as some business property tax relief. No proposals yet. They do have bills that were passed last year and are in conference, so that'll be the base for them to discuss issues. In that bill, of course, the Senate adds some money to local aids, and the House reduces the cities to the first class, but we're hopeful that will not happen. In the transportation bill, I wish I had a magic wand or something. It's very difficult to determine what will happen there. The Senate would like to spend some more money in terms of new revenue, and they've talked about a gas tax or an increase in the metro sales tax for transit. The House is going to be using existing funds, taking some funds out of the general fund and transferring them into transportation. So there's big differences there. We'll see what happens. I mean, and transportation seems to be the major policy area that everyone is talking about, that we need to do something. But the question is, how do we do it? And I'll stand for questions, Madam Chair.
Just looking to see if we have any questions from committee members. And, I just want to say I appreciate all the hard work you do at the Capitol to represent us and to bring information back to us on these topics which deeply impact our city. So I'm not seeing any questions right now.
I have one more
Sure,
item.
yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair, in the House targets, there was a reduction of $9.5 million in the Government Operations Committee. In the Senate, I think there was actually an increase of $30 million. In that bill includes all the pension programs. Pensions were not reduced at all for anyone. All the statewide, local, were okay, I hope. In the Senate, there's increased funding for ice arenas. I think there's a refrigeration problem in many of the oldest ice rinks, and there's to be about, the Senate's proposing $15 million through the Mighty Ducks program to change those refrigeration systems. There's also some money for the Judges Retirement Fund in the Senate. But they're apart, and I know we're all concerned about what it means for statewide pension funds and our own local funds, and they have not been touched.
Thank you for that. So without further questions here in our committee, and it looks like this is our last item, I think I'll just move to receive and file this verbal report. Thank you very much. And without further business before us, we are adjourned. Thank you.